What's the biggest mistake people make when they're trying to overcome lower back pain? That's what we're going to explore in this tutorial. It's something that I get asked by most people when it comes to lower back pain, and it's something that most people want to get straight into when they're starting to overcome their lower back pain. If you do want help with your lower back pain, just click the link below, go through to my How to Overcome Lower Back Pain consultation and coaching, which I'll tell you a little bit more about at the end of the tutorial. The two most common mistakes people make is number one, they go straight to exercise, and number two, they don't use everyday activities or causes to be able to solve their lower back pain. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through each one of those mistakes, talk a little bit more about it, put a little bit more flesh on the bones, as it were, and dig a little bit deeper into the detail. The first part of this is exercise isn't a pain reducer, as it were. If you need to identify, or if it is identified that you need some core endurance, some core strength, some core stability, or muscles need to be activated, then exercise can be useful. But first of all, we have to identify that. And again, that's a big part of the online questionnaires, the online consultation, is to identify if you need exercises. Now, there are ways of doing that within the questionnaires, but there are also some videos where we look at core endurance, core stability, core strength, and we can identify what it is we need if we need it. Some people may not need it. They may need something else. But what we have to do first is identify the, in a sense, the driver of the lower back pain. If there is an issue with the endurance, the strength, the stability, or the muscle activation, then we can go about doing it. The second thing is, depending on the type of pain that you have or the type of driver that you have, exercise can make it worse. So for example, if you were to come down or if you were to identify that when muscles are activated, it starts to aggravate your lower back pain. So what's basically happening here, or it could be a couple of things. It could be the activation from the muscles that are essentially crushing the lower back, and that's creating the problem because the muscles are so active that they're causing the problem that way because they're so active. Or it could be that you just don't have the endurance and they're fatiguing, and that's causing the problem. So what we could then do is, if it's either of those, so if you've got the crushing type where the muscles are so active, if we're doing sort of quite high level side planks where we're just getting you to stay here for ages and ages and ages, where there's lots of muscle activation, that could be exacerbating the problem. If muscles are fatiguing, again, it could be the same thing. So if muscles are fatiguing and then we go, okay, well, let's get you into a side plank, well, that could be adding to that fatigue. It could be speeding it up. So we may need to go to the other side. We may need to try and relax the muscles before we can start doing the exercise. So it may be that we need to, first of all, relax the muscles, doing some foam rolling, doing some stretching, going for a massage, whatever it may be. What we can then do is, as the pain starts to reduce, or you start to identify that it's reducing, then we may be able to start adding some exercises in if we need it. If you're a very strong individual anyway, and the core tests that are online that you essentially pass, then we don't need to worry about it. But if you fail those tests, then it may be identified that we need to go about putting some in, but we need to do the relaxation bit first. So it's identifying that. Basically, it all comes down to what we can identify. Then we can understand what we need to put in its place. And finally, as I've mentioned, they're very good at building strength, endurance, stability, and activating muscles. But again, that depends on the lower back pain. So what does some of that mean? Well, let's take muscle activation. So let's say that sitting is a problem for you. You can't sit for a long time. Now, there could be many other drivers for that. It could be you've got hip trigger points. It could be that you've got lack of range of movement at the hip. It could be that you've got a specific type of lower back pain that sitting doesn't work with. But it could also be that muscles just kind of switch off and just get lazy. And then that puts pressure on the lower back, puts stress on the lower back, and creates a problem. So what we could do is, if that comes on after, say, 5 minutes, so every 5 minutes we just get you up, we just do a quick little side plank, quick little side plank, quick little bird dog, get the muscles active, sit you back down and crack on, and off we go again. We may find that that's helpful, so you're able to sit, break it up with a little bit of muscle activation, and then those sitting periods become longer, go from 5 minutes to 7 minutes to 10 minutes, so on and so forth. So it can be just a very good way just to activate the muscles, just to keep them active so they don't get lazy whilst you're sat down. It could be that. It may not be that, but it could be that. So we have to go through identifying what that trigger is, and also what exercise is going to be useful for you with regards to what comes up in the consultation, what comes up in the assessment, so on and so forth. So we can then say, well, we've got some objective data here or some subjective data here that you've written down. Okay, what we're going to do is we're going to put this in place to mitigate it, to overcome it, so on and so forth. So it's very much about, number one, identifying the problem and then putting a solution in place to overcome it. Now we're looking at mistake number 2, which is not using everyday activities or identifying everyday causes. Now, some people will start doing this anyway because they've had back pain for a while and they've just started modifying because they find things that keep them out of pain. That's what we're essentially doing, because what we're saying there is we're identifying, and let's just, well, probably the 3 most common that I get is sitting, lifting, or being stationary. So they're probably the 3 biggest causes. So what we have to try and do is either reduce the amount that you sit, lift, or be stationary. We have to modify each of those, or we have to eliminate each of those. Now, depending on what you need them for and why you need them will depend on, do we eliminate them, reduce them, or just modify them. So first of all, we have to identify that. Then it's very much putting a solution in place. Now, if it's lifting, it might be that you've been lifting with a rounded spine. So if we say we go with a neutral spine, that solves the problem. Great, tick that box, move on. But it could be something else. It could be the range of movement at the hips, could be all sorts of things, but we have to identify it. If it's being stationary, that's a little bit easier because we can just keep moving around, obviously depending on the when it's happening, why it's happening, where it's happening, so on and so forth. So what we are trying to do here is reduce the trigger, because if we keep triggering it, it's always going to be sensitive to it. So as soon as you start even looking like you're going to go into that position, the back will become twitchy. But if we can stay away from that, the back won't get twitchy. It will relax itself to some degree because it won't be going into those positions, those postures, or that stationary, static position, if you will. Number 2, it's this that eliminates the pain or reduces the pain. So when I talked about exercises before, that's more about the endurance, the strength, the stability, the muscle activation. There may be it may have an indirect effect on reducing pain, but again, we have to get rid of the pain, because if we are sat down, we're in pain, we then get up and do some planks, some side planks, or we go to the gym or whatever, we're building that strength and stability on a crumbly foundation. So we have to solidify the foundation, which is removing the pain and then building on top the correct endurance, strength, stability, and muscle activation. So it's very much, first of all, we have to identify what the problem is. We then have to use the necessary everyday activities to be able to overcome that. But we can't do that without understanding what the problem is first to build the solution second. And number 3, as we start reducing the pain, the tissues will start to calm down. So again, what we could be doing is we're in pain, you get tight, you then go for a massage, the massage person does a thing, everything's nice and relaxed. Then 2 days later, 3 days later, bang, you're tight again. So what you've done is you've not eliminated the cause, you've treated the symptom. You've treated the tightness with the massage, and then the tightness come back because you're doing the sitting, you're being stationary, you're lifting incorrectly, whatever it may be, which is then driving you back into being tight again. But if we can modify the sitting, the lifting, and the being stationary, what might be useful is then we do a massage to calm all the muscles down, but because we've modified the driver and the trigger, it doesn't come back and it stays calm. And then what we can then do is start building exercise in to keep those muscles active, to keep them doing the thing that we want them to do, so on and so forth. So it's about rethinking how we go about treating lower back pain. And there are some ideas that hopefully you might be able to recognise. And if you are suffering with lower back pain, you do want some help, click the link below as I mentioned before. And what we will do is we will help you identify the triggers for your lower back pain. That's what you do. You enter your details, you get sent 2 questionnaires, you fill those out. I will then go through and read them if there's a mechanical aspect to it, and if there's things that we can modify and change, I will then book you in for the consultation, and we'll then go about understanding that further and then putting a plan in place for you. You've then got 2 weeks of coaching afterwards to be able to email, refine the plan, ask questions, clear up any queries, so on and so forth. So if you want some help with your lower back pain, please do click the link below, and I look forward to speaking to you in the future.